You've changed, haven't you? Maybe you've heard it. You've changed. You've grown cold. You don't care anymore. But what they call coldness is the echo of a soul entering maturity. This is not a video of explanations. It's a mirror for those who've stopped reacting and started observing, for those who've traded the noise of approval for the serenity of presence. The illusion of apathy, when sovereignty is mistaken for distance. There is a thin, invisible line between feeling deeply and protecting your energy. A line often misunderstood by those who still equate love with emotional reaction. When you stop responding to chaos, many interpret it as apathy, but in truth, it is sovereignty. It's what happens when your soul no longer bends to the emotional pulls of those still addicted to drama. You haven't stopped feeling. In fact, you feel so deeply that you've learned not to lose yourself in every passing emotion. The absence of reaction isn't absence of feeling, it's presence of consciousness. It's when the soul no longer fragments itself to be accepted, when intensity gives way to integrity. Many still confuse involvement with love, but sometimes love is exactly not getting involved in someone else's game. It's refusing to feed patterns that perpetuate pain. Spiritual sovereignty is the ability to remain rooted in your center, even when the world tries to drag you back into old cycles. That center scares people, because those still caught in emotional reactivity will see your neutrality as absence. But that's when the soul truly blooms. Where reactivity once lived, now lives discernment. This is not a cold or mechanical state. It's a quiet warmth, a fire that no longer burns but illuminates. A level of emotional maturity that no longer needs to shout to be felt. You are not above others. You are simply within yourself. And that alone unsettles those still performing emotional wars to prove their worth. Because while some are still in emotional survival, you begin to walk as one who carries peace. And for many, peace feels like disinterest. They're still addicted to the adrenaline of chaos, to the high of validation. When your soul expands, it begins choosing carefully where to land its energy. It doesn't mean you love less, it means you love with more clarity. Like a tree that's grown tall, you no longer bend to every emotional storm. Your roots won't allow it. And from that grounded place blooms true compassion, not the kind that sacrifices constantly, but the kind that watches with tenderness and boundaries. So when you stop reacting, when you choose silence, when your presence starts to disturb those who once thrived on your reactivity, remember, this is not apathy. This is soul sovereignty. A rare sacred state where feeling hasn't disappeared. It's simply retreated to where there is reciprocity, depth, and vibrational respect. When silence becomes the greatest response for so long, you tried to be understood. You explained. You over-explained. You exhausted yourself translating your soul to people who only heard what confirmed their projections. But then, something shifts. Explanation stops being urgent. You begin to see that anything requiring too much explanation is no longer aligned. And silence appears. At first it feels like absence, like retreat. But with time, it becomes a sanctuary. Then a rite. And finally, a language. Silence begins to speak for you. Not because you lack words, but because you've learned. Most conversations were never soul to soul. They were mask to mask, pattern to pattern. Silence is not passivity. It is a higher form of response. It demands more strength than a scream, more clarity than an argument. To choose not to explain requires courage. To simply be whole in a world that invites you to break. True silence is not the absence of sound. It is the full presence of self. It's when your vibration speaks louder than any speech. Only someone deeply attuned to their own soul can hold this frequency. In this space of silence, there is reverence. You stop wasting energy trying to change what resists transformation. You stop wounding yourself to fit in where you no longer belong. You begin to protect the sacredness of your energetic field, to honor your intuition, each word you no longer speak becomes a flower blooming inside. When silence becomes your answer, your life changes frequency. People who only knew how to connect through conflict start to fade, and for the first time, you feel the peace of not needing to prove anything. You learn your energy is sacred. Responding to everything is giving away your light to those still choosing shadow. So you stop, not out of indifference, but out of respect for yourself. Because response is a transaction. And when peace lives inside you, the noise of the world no longer finds purchase. Silence becomes your temple, not a defense. The space where you finally hear your soul's voice, uninterrupted. Detachment is not indifference, it's spiritual freedom. Detachment isn't about hardening, it's about refinement. It's realizing that real love never demands self-abandonment. Detachment blooms when the soul matures enough to tell the difference: connection versus conditioning, presence versus dependency, love versus attachment. It doesn't grow from emptiness, but from inner abundance. Indifference, by contrast, is frozen emotion, a scar of unreleased trauma, a soul so guarded it stopped feeling. Detachment is something else entirely. It's warm clarity. It's compassionate discernment. It's the kind of love that no longer needs to cling to exist. To detach is not to give up on others. It's to stop giving up on yourself to keep them. Sometimes it means leaving. But leaving with reverence, not to hurt, not to blame, but to honor what was and admit what is. Detachment is the silent alchemy of a soul that's walked through the dark night and returned with a new ethic of love. I stay where I can be whole. I love where my peace isn't the price. People will mistake your detachment for coldness because they still equate love with sacrifice. But you don't sacrifice your center anymore. What once was fear of being seen as insensitive is now courage to choose yourself. And that choice doesn't isolate, it liberates. Only the free can love without cages, give without losing themselves, be present without being owned. Detachment doesn't sever, it purifies. And in what remains, after all fear has melted, lives love, the real kind, the kind that asks for nothing. The soul doesn't hate, it simply withdraws. An awakened soul does not scream. It doesn't compete or beg to be seen. It watches, it feels, and when it realizes the soil no longer nourishes its truth, it leaves, not out of pride, not out of coldness, but because it understands. Love cannot live where it constantly has to prove itself. More than that, the spirit withers in places where its frequency must shrink to fit. Hatred requires connection. A liberated soul no longer accepts bonds built on pain, so it does not hate, it withdraws. Withdrawal is not escape, it's a silent ritual of return to the sacred self. It's the moment you hear that whisper, not here, not anymore. And you honor that, without drama, without performance, because you've learned to stay is a mutual act, but to leave can be yours alone. That departure is not abandonment, it's reverence. Because real love doesn't impose, it understands the time of each soul, even the time to go. You don't withdraw to punish, you withdraw to heal, because you've realized that insisting is building bridges over emotional chasms. And fragile bridges always cost something, your peace. And now, your peace is non-negotiable. You no longer fight to be understood. You simply honor your truth. And in doing so, you create the space for the most sacred reunion, the one with yourself. You are not cold. You are whole. You are clear. You are awake. What the world calls coldness is simply the restorative silence of one who has finally come home to themselves. Pain didn't harden you. It brought you back. Back to the soul you lost trying to be accepted. Back to the center you abandoned trying to be loved. Now, the noise that once demanded your reaction no longer moves you. Because you no longer live to react, you live to remain, and in this inner stillness, what isn't real dissolves. Because the peace you've built inside no longer tolerates the wars you once accepted out of fear of being alone. It's not apathy, it's evolution. The silent alchemy of someone who stopped chasing and started walking with themselves. Someone who dropped the roles, the emotional contracts, the versions that existed just to be loved. And in letting all that go, you found yourself, right where you've always been, within. Now, breathe, return to yourself. And if this message echoed inside your soul, it's because your time has come. The time to stop explaining, the time to stop shrinking, the time to let your presence be your prayer. Comment below, I no longer sacrifice my center for the illusion of connection. Let this be your silent right, your vibrational anchor. And share this message with someone you feel, in silence, is also on their way home. Because when one soul awakens, it lights the path for others without saying a word. Final mantra. Today I do not react. I observe. I choose my peace.